This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, welcome to a new edition of Behind the Headlines. I'm Maura Donnelly, an associate of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Our usual co-host, Charlie Greenwald, is on assignment, and we look forward to having him back soon. I'm very happy to have in his place today, Jerry Sturtmatter.
Hi, Maura.
Jerry is a board member of the Susquehanna Valley. Thank you so much for being here today to pinch hit for Charlie.
Oh, thank you very much. I welcome the opportunity.
Well, we're really very happy to have one of our regulars back today. We love having Bob Latham with us. He is the Executive Vice President of the Associated Pennsylvania Constructors.
That's correct.
Yes.
Good to be with you, Maura, and Jerry, as always.
Well, we're have you been busy? We've got some budget stuff going on that you might be a little bit concerned about.
Well, I've been busy, but I can also say that our members have been busy. We represent the road and bridge builders throughout the Commonwealth. We've been spending the summer and the spring and the summer fixing our roads and bridges. I want to remind everybody that we passed what we call Act 89, Comprehensive Systematic Transportation Funding Bill, back in 2013. That's allowed us to rehabilitate thousands of bridges and create a much safer travel environment for the motoring public. So they've been busy all summer. I'd like to urge all the listeners to slow down when they get to highway work zones. That's very important. Yes. There are moms and dads out there working, and we'd like to send them home in the evening safe and sound. So the point is we've had a busy summer. We're making a lot of progress rehabilitating highways and bridges in the Commonwealth. We're not building a lot of new ones. We're fixing old ones that we have. We have an old system, and we need to keep it up to date.
And we're at the start of a new school year, and that means that the bridges and the roads are safer for our school buses and our children,
Absolutely.
Which is really good,
Yeah.
Which I know was one of the biggest priorities with getting some funding, was to make sure that everybody was safe, including our school children.
Absolutely.
Yeah, those years ago, when that group that still exists now, that came together with everyone in the Commonwealth saying we needed to have a predictable funding source so we could take care of the safety. We were looking at years of 1 year to the next, not knowing what was going to go on. By having this predictable funding and having it being intermodal, we're taking care of pedestrians, taking care of the cyclists, we're taking care of the school buses that we had these weight-restricted bridges that then the school buses and the school kids had to be on more dangerous routes than what they should have been. And so that was all great. That was done in a bipartisan fashion 4 years ago. Now, this fall, we're faced with the problems that the legislature and the governor had in July 1st of not funding a fully funded budget on time. And now we're going into the fall with having this problem there, and it's going to be affecting and be very expensive for all the counties and that have to take care of the local roads with these dollars too, and all the other transit systems and the highway builders to go forward if you can't plan, when they want to go and borrow this money. What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, the biggest concern we have immediately is the borrowing of money from the Motor License Fund. The Motor License Fund, it was roughly about $3.5 billion a year. We're talking about $700 million, easy math. That's 20% of the fund. So if you look at 20% of any organization or any system's cash flow, it has to have an impact on something. So
borrowing for what? Let's explain to our
borrowing money from
the
transportation fund, if you will, to put into the general fund, because, as Jerry just said, we haven't funded the budget that allegedly constitutionally was supposed to be funded July 1.
This quote-unquote borrowing is to keep state government open and running.
Right, right. Now, let's make no mistake, this has been done in the past, but not at this magnitude. And the money has to be paid back within 13 months. Well, that's fine. The point is, what happens in the ensuing 13 months? Do we have projects that kind of get put on the shelf a little bit because we don't have the cash flow? Are there payments to existing projects, contracts that are going to be slower as a result of the cash flow disruption? Because when you take money from the transportation fund and put it in the general fund, that leaves a hole in the transportation fund. It has to. So we, from a sort of that narrow industry standpoint, are questioning that. We're a little bit concerned about that until we get a better comfort level that that's somehow not going to be disruptive. The other part, Jerry, that you mentioned is this discussion about, well, rather than look at what we need to do to fund state government, which unfortunately I think is going to require some sort of broad-based tax increase of some fashion, let's look at various pots of money and grab from that and grab from this. And one of the results of Act 89 was what's called the Multimodal Fund, which again, the beauty of Act 89 was it was a comprehensive transportation bill. So not just roads, but public transit, which is very important in not just urban areas, but all across the Commonwealth. And then also port projects, short line rail, which is very economically important, dirt and gravel roads, which is good for the environment because it stops runoff of sediment into streams in rural areas. Those kind of things are all funded by what they call the Multimodal Fund. And that's a target, that's one of those pots of money targets that people are looking at.
Has it been affected so far? Or?
No, it's like a number of different things that a group of House members has been looking at and saying, well, we don't need to really do anything. We can just take money out.
We don't need to raise taxes.
We don't need to raise
can just get money over here.
Over here and over there.
Yeah. Always wise.
So
right?
we're very, very concerned that, again, because of the legislature's inability to deal with the budget situation, that they keep looking at the transportation fund as a pot of money. We already have that problem with the state police. Exactly.
The fact that that's true, they're on the turnpike and they do things that, with highways with safety that, there are some dollars there that would make sense. But it's been growing and growing, trying to balance the general fund budget off the backs of the motor license fund.
Well, that's right. I mean, so we passed Act 89 in 2013, and immediately over the ensuing 2 years, take another $200 million for the state police. Well, you come, over a 10-year period, that's $2 billion. That's a lot of work.
Right.
What's the status of that? Because I know we've had you on and we've talked about that before. That it was just being drained. What?
The Senate version actually, well, let me back up. There was legislation in 2016 that put a cap on it, and then a 4% per year reduction to take it back to from the current $800 million to $500 million. The Senate bill, the Senate funding bill, which includes a lot of things that I guess House members don't like, did have the first year 4% reduction. So that plan is being implemented at this point, as far as we know.
So the cap's in place.
The cap's in place, and they took it back a little bit. I also have to give some credit to Governor Wolf for starting that conversation on that, looking at the one aspect of that, which is townships and boroughs that don't have their own police force relying on the state police, which is increasing the cost burden on the state police. So he come out in his budget address and with a proposal to fund a portion of that. We would like to see it go further, but the point is the governor really got this conversation started with, to give him credit for that, taking a look at how can we at least start to look at solutions to that particular issue and accelerate it to the solution rather than waiting 10 years. So, and there are a number of other legislative leaders who are on board and trying to fix that as well.
What do you think the viewers should know about this? Are they gonna see something right away?
What the viewers need to know is that in 2013, a lot of, as you said, Jerry, bipartisan leaders got together on both sides of the aisle. Governor Corbett, House Democrat and Republican leaders put up the votes in order to pay for improving our transportation infrastructure. Look at what President Trump ran on. He ran on tax reform, health care, and infrastructure. Unfortunately, in Washington, none of that's happened yet, in my mind, particularly the infrastructure part. But the point is, people understand that we have to get around. People understand we need good transportation. And by and large, in that Act 89 debate, we believe that the people said, okay, we'll pay a little more as long as it goes towards infrastructure. What the viewers need to know is to communicate with their members of the General Assembly that this
do
money wasn't put there in order for you 4 years later to take out to avoid a responsibility on the general fund side.
Right, and the other thing with the viewers, need to know is that these safety improvements don't happen overnight. They're all part of a 12-year plan that goes into a metropolitan area that then goes down to each county, down to each municipality, in looking at, well, which ones are more dangerous, which ones do we need to fix first, and these lists are put together and looked at, and so this is a long process, and if you go and you stop that, then the predictability is gone.
Yeah, predictability
and everything,
is gone,
and once you stop, then it's that much harder to get started again. Plus, it's expensive, to shut things down and then start them up again, because you got to do the engineering studies all over again. You got to do the land acquisition all over again. All that happens. So that's the thing. I'm so glad you're here that we could talk about this, because you are the expert. We look to for in the transportation area, but I'm sure that not only the roads and bridges that people are affected by, but all the commerce that goes by with the rails and the ports that are also counting on this. And when you take this now, and what the legislature and the governor have to look at, okay, there's $700 million. Which part of this big plan is that $700 million coming from? Is it all going to come from mass transit in Philadelphia, or in Pittsburgh? Or are the rails going to be left out? Or are the bridges that are supposed to be fixed, are they the ones going to be left out?
Yeah, well, the bottom line is...
Who's going to decide that?
Yeah.
And the thing is, we wanted to get away from that. We wanted to make sure that it was done in the most effective, efficient way. And by doing this, it's a huge problem. So I think all the viewers should make sure that they pay attention to this.
And I think one final point is this. What this points out is that we really have a need to do a thorough examination of state government and look at whether we need to restructure state government. And a lot of people are starting to talk about that and say, in addition to looking at how we're set up, first of all, the question is, if there are all these unused pots of money, well, why are there? Why are there? If there's allegedly, you hear from some members that, oh, well, we've got savings here and savings there. Well, if that's true, then maybe we need to look at how government is structured, possibly even go back to a constitutional convention and look at changing the structure of state government.
We have the structure there. It's a budget year. I mean, they're supposed to look at everything, come up with what our needs are, then look at all the different revenue streams, if they could, to pay for those things, and then decide that, after the appropriation, hearings, the governor presents the budget in February, they talk about it, and then they finish it up June 30th. That's the plan. They just need to go back to what the Constitution says.
Well, the issue there is, what are the revenue sources?
And I need to have you both back on again so that we can continue this discussion. But we are out of time, but I want to thank you so much for being with us today.
Sure.
I have a feeling this is going to be an ongoing issue, and that we will have you back to continue to update us and
Good, look
keep
forward
us informed.
to it. Hopefully I'll be able to talk about how we didn't do a lot of
Yeah.
stuff.
All right, we will definitely have you back then.
Okay.
Thanks so much for joining us on this segment of Behind the Headlines. Up next, Charlie and I will be on location in Pottsville, Pennsylvania at the Yuengling Brewery, and we will be having a great conversation with Dick Yuengling's daughters, who are set to take over the company at some point. Thanks very much.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, helping hospitals provide healing, health, and hope to communities across the state. And by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. The Pennsylvania Chamber serves as the frontline advocate for business on Pennsylvania's Capitol Hill by influencing the legislative, regulatory, and judicial branches of state government. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org.
Welcome back to the second segment of Behind the Headlines. In this segment, Maura and I are filming on location in Pottsville, Pennsylvania, at the Yuengling Brewery, where we're joined by, well, Mara, why don't you introduce our special guest today?
Oh, I'd be happy to. I'm very excited to have Jennifer and Wendy Yuengling with us today. They are full-time at the brewery, helping their dad on a regular basis. We're going to get into a little bit of detail about what a day in the life is like.
And we had your father on an earlier show, and did a wonderful job.
There are four of you. There's four daughters, correct? And we don't have Cheryl and Debbie here today, but maybe some other time we'll get to talk to them. But I'd like to welcome you both. We're really excited to be here and to talk to you.
Thank you.
About your company.
We're so happy to host you here today.
Well, I think it's awesome that there are women that are going to take over, first time in the generational family history that will be running Yuengling someday. We don't know when. We've had conversations about that. But So, Jennifer, why don't we start with you? Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do here on a daily basis, and what you like and don't like?
Certainly. So I started the brewery in my mid-20s. So I've been here just over 20 years now. Came back not really with a plan of understanding where I would fit in or what my role would be. Our dad got us together back in the early 90s, all four of us. And at that point in time, we were undergoing a huge growth potential. And he needed to make some big financial decisions and kind of wanted the reassurance that one or four of us, or however many, had an interest in coming to work for the family business. So I think I was the first one that bit on that hook. And I come back, and I sort of felt my way around, not really knowing where my role would be, became involved in operations, found that was to my liking, and found that that's maybe where my talents lay. So I went to brewer school, a 10-week diploma course to become a brewer. Yes, and I've been involved in operations ever since. So I steer more towards the other end of it as far as warehousing and logistics and trucking and scheduling. But overall, I work side by side with my dad every day of the week.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
That's just awesome. And Wendy, what's your a day like for you? How'd you get started?
Yeah, there's not really a typical day here. I mean, we're a pretty lean organization, and we wear a lot of hats, so you can find us involved in just about everything. But I focus primarily on the administrative side. My path was a little bit different from Jennifer. After that conversation, I was still in college when we had talked about our interest in working for the business, and I decided to go outside of the company and work on my own for a few years, working for other people. And I joined the brewery in 2004. So I've been here for about 13 years now, and just kind of worked my way through the system, starting on the sales side, working through marketing, working through operations and HR, and I sort of found my niche on the administrative side. So I'm still involved with sales and marketing stuff, but it's the hiring and the IT and the financial side of the business that's where I've landed.
Oh, that's very cool that you both you found your strengths and went and worked in that area.
And I think we found that we're in separate areas of the company too. So Wendy drives a lot of the HR, sales, and marketing functions, and I like to stay more towards the operations end of it. So between the two of us, we kind of have our hands over everything.
It works well because it's a much different business than it was when my dad bought it in 1985. It's a much larger company. We're in 20 states now. We've got over 350 employees, so it's a much different business, and I think it plays to our strengths, and we work well together.
Yeah. And that's a key point, how not only has our business changed over the last 30 plus years, but the industry has changed as well. And when my dad took over in 1985, we had maybe one salesman plus my dad. So now we have upwards of 60 sales representatives out in the field. Yeah, so it's changed an awful lot. We've got a good team in place in terms of a sales leadership team and operations leadership team. So it's grown an awful lot to the point where we're no longer the one-man show where everything was directed by our dad. And we're fortunate enough that we have each other, but we also have a good group of leaders to work with us.
Yeah.
Well, once your father made the announcement that his daughters would be succeeding him and laying forth a succession plan, did you hear any talk or gossip within the brewing community questioning whether or not women could possibly do this? Was there anything about your gender coming into
I hope not.
I don't think so. I think it's more commonplace, especially in the brewing industry now than it was 20 years ago. I think people embrace the fact that the company's going to be female-owned someday. a lot of women drink beer, so I think we cater to that. And
Is that true, Maura?
Yeah, yes. I can speak from firsthand knowledge.
Yes.
so I really don't feel like it's been any, it hasn't been a big deal.
I think we downplay that aspect of it.
Yeah.
It's an important aspect of our company that we will someday be a woman-owned company. But I think in our minds, it's more about the quality of the products, being a good employer, and supporting our employees.
So your other two sisters are involved, but not on a full-time basis. So let's just talk about them because they're not here. But tell us a little bit about what they do and the contributions that they make to the organization.
They are here full time.
Okay.
Yeah, so they had been outside of the business for a few years, but they came back recently. And our one sister, Debbie, works on the sales administration side, so she manages our pricing and our sales administration team. So she's been back involved in that for a couple of years now. And our youngest sister, Cheryl, she actually spreads through both of our areas. She works on the administrative side on our system. She does a lot with order services and in the warehouse and with purchasing. So we've all sort of found our niches, which is nice.
That's great.
I have to ask a question from the other side. Do your husbands work here as well?
We do not. No, actually, my husband is retired and is a full-time dad, so he's not a part of the business.
Yeah.
Okay, so we were wondering, and that would produce all kinds of interesting dynamics, wouldn't it? 4 husbands here working for 4 wives.
We actually have enough internal dynamics in our family. No need for any more.
But the one question, you said you're in 20 states now?
Correct.
20 states. Each one of those states has a different rules and regulations regarding alcohol. So you have to package, you have to distribute in accordance with each one of those states. That must be very difficult to keep track of and to make arrangements for. Logistics is a problem, I guess.
Well, we have our core portfolio, we have our core SKUs, and we don't really deviate from that regardless of what market it's in. But when we go into a new state, we select a wholesaler partner, and they're really our local eyes and ears, and they're the ones that get our product to market. So it's very highly regulated in our industry. It's a 3-tier system where any market that we want to go into, we have a distributor partner that helps us get there.
What does the 3-tier system mean?
So in our industry, ever since the repeal of Prohibition, there's 3 tiers in our business. So you've got the retailers that sell to the end consumer. You've got the middle tier, which is our distributor. So when we want to go into a state, we have to ship to the wholesaler. And then you've got the brewers, the suppliers.
So it's important
it is
for
unique.
us. It's important for us, as for any brewer for that matter, to have that good wholesaler relationship in that middle tier, because essentially we're partners, and then we're also partners with the retailer on the consumer level.
So we know you both are going to be here for a long time. Where do you see the company going long term? Have you thought about your own sort of strategy going forward?
Yeah, very, very much so. Our dad is more of a short-term thinker, so it's been difficult for us and the other members of our leadership team to get him to be more open-minded and to have a strategic plan, if you will, out maybe 5 years or so.
Yeah.
So it's the marketplace. We spoke earlier about the industry being so much different today, whereas in 1985 there may have been less than 100 breweries across the country. Today there's upwards of 5,000. So that being said, it's different, it's more competitive in the marketplace, and we need to think more open-minded maybe than we had in the past.
There's so much upside for our brands. We're only in 20 states, and I don't think we necessarily aspire to be in 50 states or even an international brand, but we're only anywhere between a 2 and a 3 share in most of our markets. So there's tons of potential for the brands, and we feel like there's a lot of things that we can continue to do to drive the business to keep us successful for the next generation, which is what we think about. Not necessarily 10 years down the road, but keeping the business strong for our kids.
We hear there's 9 grandchildren. Is that true? So you get a couple more generations.
Any interest brewing? And
it's hard to say. They're all fairly young yet, and it's a fine line between exposing your child to something like that and forcing them into it. So in my mind, I feel like my children know that the brewery is here, it's my career, it's our family legacy. If they have an interest, there's an opportunity for them.
Now, I was just in northern Ontario recently, And I don't know if you distribute to Canada or
No,
Ontario.
Oh,
Well,
you're so
if you
close.
don't, Yuengling was all over the place.
Oh, gosh.
Really?
Yes, they were fishing camps,
Huh.
and
They're
Yuengling was.
bootlegging it.
So they
Brought
were
it in
being,
off
it was
the-
being
off-
brought
in
in
the
from
truck.
America then, but I didn't know if you distributed there or if it had just been brought in.
Yeah,
by
no, there were some
people.
smugglers going in.
I wonder how they got across the border.
Do you have plans to test the Canadian waters?
That's hard to say. With the 3 breweries that we have 2 breweries here in Pottsville, and then we have one in Tampa, Florida. So if you look at the logistics and basically how far and how much it would cost to get a case of beer from those 3 locations, westward or any further north, it makes it difficult, and capacity issues too. We need to look at how much capacity we have in each of our 3 plants.
So what's your favorite part of your day?
I love dealing with the people. We have such a good team here, and when you get the opportunity to go out and talk to consumers, people are so passionate about beer and they're passionate about brands, and I think ours in particular resonates. We're America's oldest brewery, we're family owned and operated, and those are things that are really important to people when they, decide how they want to spend their money. So I think that part of it is very cool.
We have that great story. We have that tagline of we're America's oldest brewery, and sometimes we don't tell that story as well as we should, but you do see, and I get out into retail on occasion, most of my time is spent internally within the plant, but just to see consumers' reaction and how much they appreciate the fact that we're independent, we're family owned, and that we've lasted through to 6 generations, that gives me more of an appreciation of what our ancestors went through to get us where we are today.
And it really is such a fantastic history of the company, and we should make sure that our viewers see the website because they can go and read everything on there. It's just great. Well, we want to thank you so much for having us here. It's been very exciting to meet both of you, the next generation of the company, and hopefully someday we'll get to meet all 4 of you. We think it's going to be great for this area, for the country, to have women leading this company. It's going to be wonderful, and we want to thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
Thank
You're most
you.
welcome.
Join us next week on a new edition of Behind the Headlines.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, helping hospitals provide healing, health, and hope to communities across the state. And by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. The Pennsylvania Chamber serves as the frontline advocate for business on Pennsylvania's Capitol Hill by influencing the legislative, regulatory, and judicial branches of state government. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org.